We have a festive Christmas update here. A lot of developers have been releasing new stuff over the Christmas period. So in this video, I'm gonna go ahead and show you stuff that's come out so far. So obviously, the big one is going to be a hen version 1.9 and a new release of items flow to go along with that. Now, Edahen 1.9b does add a bunch of new features, but of course the main thing is that it now adds support for 1.x and 2.x firmware using the bypasser exploit, the new hypervisor exploit released by Spectre. So if you are on 1.x, you can take advantage of that exploit and now use it to run a more stable version than you'll get on other firmwares that have to rely on things like the lip hijackers. So very handy for people on 1.x. Also, and the item flow release will now work on 1.x and 2.x so that is a big improvement. There's also a lot of new features for the existing firmwares that already had access to items flown. ETA hand beforehand, we do have a new remote play which gives you the pin code as well as the account ID, so you can connect a remote device. I believe it automatically activates your account if the account isn't already activated, so you'll be able to connect a remote device from instead of having to use the dev link or the payload. From IdleSauce, it's now built into ETA hand. There's also a package sorting option in the package installer. I'm not sure if this was available in a previous version. I've just never noticed it before, so it may be a new feature here where you hit the options button in the package installer and it allows you to sort the package files from, either alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order. Or my favorite option, sorted by the most recent package file added to your USB drive, which is quite handy that way. Any new package files you put on there will appear at the top. So I quite like that option. So nice that there's some package sorting options built in there as well. And then also there's an option for test kits which is for all of the overlay stuff that we covered in a previous update. That is only for test kits, so you will not be able to access that feature on a retail console. And the new items flow build that's been released includes the that allows you to decrypt Demon and other games that couldn't be decrypted using the previous version. And a lot of the testers have already done those games that could not be decrypted before, and they have now released those. So games like Devil May Cry 5, Demon Souls, they're all now out there in the wild. They are available, so yeah, it's all been released at this point. So next, of course, we also got a new build of Goldhen version 18.10, which I've already made a dedicated video on. I'll leave it linked down in the description. But just to touch on it real quick, if you haven't seen that video, there's two new features that have been added. New version of Goldhen for the PS, there's the PO patch, which blocks the pawn devices from running the jailbreak again once Goldhen is already running to prevent instability issues. And then there's also a package scanning feature that allows you to ignore specific folders on your external drive or USB drive so that they will not be scanned when using the subdirectory. Scan with the package installer feature. That way, if you have lots of subdirectories on your external hard drive, it won't take as long to scan them to find any package files to install, because you can ignore those folders that have lots of files and subdirectories within them. So that makes it a little bit easier there. So that's a couple of improvements added in that new version. We also got new versions of PS4 debug and PS5 debug. So for PS4, we've now got support for 10.50, 10.70, and 10.71, along with stability performance improvements and fixes to load with the latest Goldhen version, as well as an implementation for hardware breakpoints. And a similar story for PS5. With PS5 debug, we've got performance improvements, stability improvements, support for 5.x firmware. We also have for it to be loaded with John Tormlum's Elf Loader, and also hardware breakpoints and optimizations for K stuff. So you can now use PS for PS5 debug on lots of other firmwares that were previously unsupported. There's also gonna be new versions of Reaper and Studio, the multi-trainer to go along with these updates. We also got a new version of the Apollo version 2.0 by Buccanaro or Damian Perino. So he's added complete PS for firmware support for all firmwares. And this is because it no longer requires Goldhen or PS for hen or PS for debug. So normally it would use those to apply the save patches, but it seems he's implemented a method to do it internally on the Apollo save tool so that these things are not required. We also have trophy management, being able to list and export trophies, as well as lock and unlock fake XMB trophies. We've got trophy set export and backup, remove trophy sets, as well as the ability to delete PS for saves from within Apollo. Previously, you have to exit out into the menu and use the normal home menu to delete saves, but now you can do it from within Apollo itself, which just makes it a little bit more convenient. We also have the ability to show the date and time of the last game modification, so that has all been included. With this new version of the Apollo save tool, there are some warnings here about trophies. Deleting a trophy removes critical trophy files from the user account. I'm trying to play the game again. Won't populate trophies for that user. Also, fake trophy unlocking does not modify secure trophy files. It only makes changes to the XMB database. And if you play the game after applying modifications, fake results can be reset by the system. So a couple of warnings when it comes to some of the trophy features. And my favorite feature of this new update is not actually included in the notes, but it seems to launch a lot faster and get into the actual application a lot quicker than the previous versions. As when you launch it, the black screen is a lot shorter. And then the intro seems to fade in and fade out a lot quicker, getting you into the application much faster than previous versions. This might be unintentional, simply because the way that the save patches are implemented into the actual application of relying on Goldhen or PS4 debug now might be the thing that's allowing the application to launch faster. But with the intro fading in and fading out makes me think that this was a deliberate choice, which I very much appreciate. So moving on from that, we have a couple of other developments. John Tormlum has updated his retrork port for the PS5, using the homebrew launcher to include some cores. So we now have a few retro art cores. I think SNES Famicom and a few others are now supported, which means it's now possible to load some retro games through retrork on the PS5. We also have a backup created for the remote Lua injector by Master S9. So this adds save files for Artemis Engine games, which can be used to load the remote Lua loader. So this is a way of you actually getting these saves on your PS5 without having to, have a jailbreakable PS4 to resign or the save wizard to resign the save files. You don't need to do that with this. You can just restore this backup file onto your PS5, and then you will have save files for those titles. And as long as you have one of those games, you'll be able to load the save and get the remote Lua loader working. I would not necessarily recommend doing this, because obviously if you do this, you need to back up your own PS5 because restoring someone else's backup will essentially remove and reset your PS5. So you want to make sure you've backed everything up first. I wouldn't recommend using until we actually have something that we can do with the remote Lua loader, like chaining it with an existing exploit or a new exploit, because otherwise it's not really worth resetting your console over right now. But it's cool that this is now an option for those who can't resign their saves. There's also a new version of PS that Lappy is showing off here that he's allowing certain people who DM him to get access to, which is a bit strange that he wouldn't just release this publicly. Maybe he will at some point, but it does look like it might be, including a version of the Easy Package Extractor, which is something he's not really been comfortable to release or update for a while. It was an old homebrew app for 5.05 that was very popular for being able to extract your package already files installed on the PS4 to a USB drive so that you could install them on another console. He had his reasons for taking it down back then. It looks like he now might be willing to allow people to have especially access, since we can already do this with Items Flow, which has had the ability to extract your installed packages. Sometimes lastly, we also have a web server implemented for the PS5 now too. So this is Gen Web Server, a simple web server written in C to provide basic HTTP service. So you can actually host a basic web server on your PS5 using this. So essentially, it is a payload that you just inject onto your PS5 using John Torlum's ELF loader on port 902. And it will set up the configuration and run the web server. And then from there, if you use FTP, you can navigate to the data folder and then go to the Gen Web Server folder. And then in there, you'll find a config file. And that config file provides you with the port number. So you can change the port number that the web server's hosted on. You can also change the site path to where the actual location of your website is located. On the hard drive, you've also got allowed IPS. So you can whitelist specific IPS. By default, it will allow all connections. However, you can whitelist specific IPS. So if you only wanted the PS5 to be able to access the web server, you can enter the local host of the PS5 27.0.1 and then no other devices on your network access it apart from the PS5 itself. Or you could just add the IP addresses of devices that you want to allow access to the server. And there's also connection timeout and custom error messages. So the site path by default looks in the Gen web server folder for a folder called site. So we can just create a new directory in this location with a config file called site. And inside that folder, we can copy a website inside. It does provide an example website, which is a little games website with a bunch of Java-based games that you can run. So we'll go ahead and copy that website over to the site folder on the hard drive. And then once that's copied over, we can try and access it from my web browser by entering the PS5's IP address in the host box 8000 as the port number. And then if we go there, you can see that it gives us access to the website that is being hosted on our PS5. And of course, we can also access it on the PS5 itself. So if I just use the redirect option in the exploit I'm using the local host IP here to show that it is indeed running on the PS5. So when we go there, we have access to the site. And I can play a bunch of these little Java-based games. But obviously, that is just an example. You can host any other kind of HTTP-based site here on your PS5 itself. It's pretty cool. I can play Pac-Man on a web host that is running on my own console. So anyway, we go. Those are all of the main updates that have come out over Christmas time for the PS4 and the PS5. There may still be more stuff to come. We'll have to wait and see. But that's it for this one. Hope you guys have a good Christmas and a happy New Year. See you